God bless everyone. Today, I'll share the extraordinary testimony of Matthew, an 83-year-old man who faced a terrifying journey into the depths of hell, a place most of us could never fathom. There, he witnessed countless souls suffering unimaginable torment, bound by a sin that may hit closer to home than you think. What Matthew saw will shock you and leave you questioning your own path. Now, I'm going to read his letter word for word, revealing the sin that trapped these souls and why the person he encountered is there for eternity. But this isn't just a story of despair. Matthew's experience ultimately brought him to the path of Jesus and a profound redemption that changed his life forever. I had spent most of my life in Boston, living a life that many would envy. As a respected businessman, I had everything anyone could want: luxury, recognition, and respect. My name was known in the city, and I frequented prestigious events where I rubbed shoulders with the elite. I had the finest cars, the most exquisite homes, and a lifestyle that others admired. But there was something missing. Despite all the success and admiration, I felt an emptiness within me. My son and I hadn't spoken in over a decade, and in all those years, not once did I stop to ask myself why. I never thought about faith or the higher purpose of life. It was as if my achievements had become my religion, and my soul was slowly being neglected, starved for meaning. At the time, people saw me as the epitome of success, a man who had everything figured out. But what they didn't see was the hollowness inside me. I had everything the world could offer, yet I felt a constant void. My days were filled with meetings and social gatherings, but none of it brought me peace. My personal life was a mess. My family had drifted away, and I didn't even know how to reconnect with them. I had built my life on pride, vanity, and the constant chase for success, never pausing to think about the deeper values that could have grounded me. The more I climbed, the further I moved away from what truly mattered. And in 2023, I found myself at a crossroads, about to receive a lesson that would shatter everything I thought I knew. It was during this time that the most profound and harrowing experience of my life occurred. I had spent years living without purpose or reflection, consumed by the world around me, but everything changed one fateful night. That's when the truth about my life, my choices, and the consequences of my neglect would finally be revealed. What I experienced was beyond anything I could have imagined, a journey that would open my eyes to the reality of my soul and the eternal consequences of my actions. Little did I know, the path I was about to walk would lead me to a place far darker than I ever thought possible, and I would see a fate far worse than anything I could have ever feared. What I discovered on that night still haunts me to this day, but I had no idea yet that this journey would lead me to a place where only true redemption could save me. It was just another quiet evening, one that felt like any other. I was sitting in my favorite chair, a cigarette lazily burning between my fingers, and a glass of whiskey resting beside me. The world outside was still, and the only noise in the room came from the soft hum of the city beyond. But as I sat there, something began to change. At first, it was subtle, a light discomfort in my chest, something I could brush off as just a minor annoyance. I didn't think much of it, perhaps just a side effect of the years of stress and indulgence. But within moments, that discomfort grew unbearable, like a vice slowly tightening around my chest. I tried to take a deep breath, but it felt like there was no air. The pressure was suffocating, and before I could even make sense of what was happening, my vision started to blur. The pain intensified, and I dropped my glass. The cold clink of it hitting the floor was the last thing I heard clearly before my entire world seemed to darken. My heart was racing, my body was screaming, and then everything went silent. My wife's frantic scream echoed in the distance, but it was distant, fading, almost as if I were slipping away from her and from everything I had ever known. The world around me went black, and in that moment, I thought it was the end. My body, lifeless on the floor, was no longer mine. I could feel it, but I couldn't control it. I was no longer just Matthew the businessman. I had become something else, something untouchable, as if I were watching myself from a place beyond. Suddenly, I realized I wasn't alone. As I hovered above my own body, watching paramedics frantically work to revive me, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A figure appeared beside me, silent, still, and yet incredibly imposing. It wasn't a shadow or a ghost. It was something far more powerful, an angelic presence that I could feel without a single word being spoken. The figure didn't speak, didn't offer comfort or reassurance. It simply looked at me, its gaze intense and unyielding. Before I could understand what was happening, I felt myself being lifted, my soul rising as though pulled by an invisible force. I was leaving everything behind, my body, my life, and the woman who had loved me. As I ascended, I had no idea where I was headed, only that I was being taken somewhere I couldn't return from. What awaited me at the end of that journey would change everything I believed about life, death, and redemption. But at that moment, I had no way of knowing that my journey was only just beginning. As I ascended, rising higher and higher above the city that once seemed so familiar, an overwhelming sense of awe and terror filled me. The world beneath me became smaller, its vastness reduced to a mere speck in the distance. But I wasn't alone in this journey. Around me, I could see other souls being carried upward by similar figures, silent, powerful beings, their faces hidden in shadow. The souls' expressions were frozen in a mixture of confusion and fear, their paths as uncertain as my own. Each of them seemed to be floating in the same direction, yet their destinations were unknown to me. There was no way to tell where we were heading or what awaited us at the end of our shared ascent. It was as if we were all prisoners, being guided by forces beyond our understanding, with no choice but to follow. The silence was deafening, and for the first time, I truly realized how small and insignificant my life had been in the grand scheme of the universe. Suddenly, without warning, the calm ascent was interrupted by an overwhelming sense of being pulled downward. The invisible force that had been guiding me began to change direction, dragging me into a suffocating, oppressive darkness. The city below vanished entirely, and the air grew thick with a sense of foreboding. As I was drawn deeper into this void, I began to hear sounds, strange, disembodied whispers, moans of pain, and distant screams that seemed to come from every direction. The air around me was filled with the echoes of suffering, and I could feel the darkness closing in on me, pressing against my soul. Each breath became harder to take, as if the very air was weighted with the despair of those lost to this place. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced. This wasn't simply darkness. It was alive, pulsating with torment and regret, a prelude to the horrors that lay ahead. And in that moment, I understood that this wasn't just a journey. It was a descent into something far worse than I could have ever imagined. And then, before I could fully comprehend the magnitude of where I was, a massive door appeared in front of me. It loomed ahead like a fortress of stone, dark and unyielding, as if it had been there for eternity. Its surface was covered in intricate carvings, but I couldn't make sense of the symbols. Nothing about it made sense in the way the world had once made sense to me. The door seemed to pulse with a heavy, oppressive energy, and as it slowly creaked open, I felt a deep chill run through me. Beyond it, there was nothing but an endless maze of shadows, the air thick with sorrowful whispers that seemed to beckon me forward. As I crossed the threshold, the weight of what I was walking into became all too real. It wasn't just a space, it was a place of eternal torment, a void where the lost souls wandered, forever trapped in their regrets. It was here, in this cold, haunted labyrinth, that I met the first soul, an agonized figure who, with great difficulty, revealed the fate that had led him to this place. His life had been destroyed by addiction, a gambling obsession that had consumed him and torn apart his family. He spoke of his regrets with such raw emotion that it felt as though his pain was being etched into my very soul. His story was a warning, a reminder that choices, no matter how small they seemed at the time, could spiral into something far more destructive. But my journey through this dark place wasn't over yet. As I moved deeper into the maze, I encountered another soul, equally trapped, whose obsession with sports had led him down a similar path of neglect and despair. The sight of these lost souls, each consumed by their own addictions and regrets, made my heart sink. I couldn't help but wonder, was there a chance for redemption? Or was I about to join them in their eternal suffering? The answer was still unclear, but the truth was just beginning to unfold. And the deeper I went, the more I realized that I might not be able to escape this nightmare on my own. The air grew heavy with every step I took, as though the very atmosphere was soaked in despair. The ground beneath my feet was cracked and decaying, the earth crumbling like ancient bones, unable to support the weight of all the suffering it held. Shadows clung to everything, dark, oppressive, and thick, as though they were alive and trying to consume every shred of light. The silence of this place was suffocating, only broken by the eerie, bone-chilling sounds that echoed through the air. Screams, moans, and whispers surrounded me, some distant, some so close I could almost feel the breath of the souls trapped here. Each cry was filled with regret, torment, and a profound sorrow that seemed to seep into my very being. It was as though this place itself was alive, feeding off the agony of those who had fallen, and in its darkness, I could feel myself being consumed too, drawn into the suffocating weight of the past sins that filled this place. Ahead of me stretched a vast, fiery expanse, an endless valley of torment where the souls were trapped, caught in an eternal cycle of suffering. The ground was scorched, and the sky above was dark, as if the sun had abandoned this place long ago. The heat from the flames reached out, licking the edges of the valley, but it wasn't warmth. It was a burning emptiness, a cruel reminder of the souls who were forced to endure their own personal hell. As I looked closer, I could see them. Countless figures wandering aimlessly, each one trapped in their own private torment. Some clutched at their heads in agony. Others screamed in frustration, their voices blending with the wails of the lost. It was a place of deep, unrelenting sorrow, where every step, every movement seemed like an eternity of pain. These souls were not just suffering in the present. They were caught in the repetitive cycle of their own addictions, regrets, and mistakes, trapped in a loop from which there was no escape. As I moved through this bleak and tormenting landscape, a presence began to guide me. A dark, winged figure that hovered just ahead of me, silent and commanding. The wings were enormous, like the shadow of death itself, stretching far beyond anything human, their black feathers like the abyss that surrounded us. This being, though shrouded in darkness, exuded an undeniable power, and I knew instinctively that it was leading me somewhere. We moved through the valley, passing by the souls trapped in their endless suffering, and I couldn't help but wonder if this figure was showing me what lay ahead for me, or perhaps what had already consumed me. With each step, the consequences of earthly obsessions became clearer. The souls I passed were not only victims of their own actions, but prisoners of their desires, their greed, their addictions. Each one was a reflection of a life lived without true purpose, a life dominated by the pursuit of fleeting pleasures at the cost of everything else. The figure moved on, and I followed, but with each passing moment, I couldn't shake the growing realization. Was this my future too? Would I be just another soul wandering in torment, forever trapped in the cycle of my own making? The answers seemed just out of reach, but one thing was certain: this journey was far from over, and the choices I had yet to make would determine whether I would escape or become one with the endless darkness ahead. As I continued to move through the endless expanse of darkness, I began to feel a strange, faint warmth, something that seemed out of place in such a cold, oppressive environment. The dark figure guiding me paused, and in that moment, something remarkable happened. The being turned its attention toward me and revealed a moment I had long forgotten. It was a simple act, something so small that I hadn't even remembered it until now. I had given my jacket to a homeless man outside my workplace just one winter day when I saw him shivering in the cold. At the time, it had felt like a natural thing to do, a gesture of kindness, but I had never given it much thought afterward. Yet here, in the depths of hell, this moment of compassion was held up to me like a beacon of light. It was a small act, but it showed that despite everything, despite my pride, my greed, and my neglect, there was still a light within me. This act, however small, was the sliver of hope that had somehow survived in the dark corners of my soul. But then, everything changed. The darkness around me seemed to give way, and I found myself pulled into a series of visions. The first vision revealed the true nature of my life, laid bare before me in all its cold, superficial clarity. I saw my younger self, ambitious, ruthless, always looking for the next opportunity to climb higher. I saw the decisions I made, the friends I abandoned, the times I betrayed people for my own gain, all in the pursuit of wealth and power. The success that everyone else admired was nothing more than an empty shell, a facade that masked the selfishness and vanity I had chosen over the things that truly mattered. As each vision unfolded, I could feel the weight of my choices pressing down on me. I had lived a life that seemed perfect on the outside, but inside, it was hollow. I had sacrificed relationships, love, and even my own integrity for fleeting moments of glory, never understanding that in doing so, I had lost everything of real value. The weight of these realizations hit me like a storm. My heart sank, and a deep shame washed over me. I had spent my entire life ignoring the things that truly mattered, and now here I was, facing the consequences of my actions. I couldn't bear it anymore. With a broken voice, I cried out for forgiveness, a plea that came from the very depths of my soul. I begged for a second chance, vowing to change, to walk a different path, one rooted in righteousness and humility. I knew, deep in my heart, that I couldn't undo the past, but I could choose to live differently from that moment forward. As the words of my repentance echoed in the darkness, I felt a strange shift. The weight on my soul began to lighten, and I felt a peace I had never known. It was as if the shadows around me were starting to retreat, if only for a moment. And then, as if I had been released from some invisible grip, I suddenly felt myself being pulled back into the world I had left behind. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in that hellish realm. I was in my bedroom, my old, familiar room, but everything was different now. I felt a peace that I had never known, a peace that seemed to fill every inch of my being. I was no longer the man I had been. The weight of my past, though still a part of me, no longer defined me. Something had changed, something profound, and I knew that my journey, my true journey, had only just begun. But the question lingered: could I truly change, or would I be pulled back into the darkness I had once embraced? The answer was still unclear, but I was determined to find out. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on Matthew's incredible journey. What do you think about his transformation and the powerful lessons he learned? Have you ever had a moment that made you reflect on your own life choices? Please, share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights mean so much, and I can't wait to read what you have to say. Let's dive deeper into this together and keep the conversation going.